Hello, everyone. Today's topic is risk management, what that process looks like, and how we as project managers need to be aware of our risk management and how we go about that process when working on different projects. So, to start off, you can see here that there are four simple steps that we're going to utilize as part of our risk management process. Before we can manage risk, we've got to figure out what they are. So, that's that first step, identify risk, is going to get us started at least, right? So to go about doing this, there's a handful of ways. We can talk to subject matter experts, people that maybe know the tools, have worked on similar projects, lessons learned documentation, really any project documents from previous projects that might be similar or have some similarities at the least. But those are all tools we can utilize to identify risk. Now, what is a risk? A risk is something that could potentially positively or negatively impact our project. Now, what does that mean, right? It means it's something that has yet to occur. A risk is something that has yet to occur, but when it does occur, that's when it becomes an issue. And we'll have more videos down the road on what an issue is and how to manage them once these risks, come to fruition. So in a perfect world, we'll have our good list of risk that we've been able to unearth and identify through various resources and means. But now it's really important to prioritize them against each other, so we know which ones we need to be tracking closest compared to others. And we can do this in a variety of different ways. The chart that you see here is one example. I've seen them as simple as 3x3, 2x2 grids of just low, medium, high. This one breaks it down a little further. It's a 5x6. So you can see, rare, 0 to 10%, unlikely, possible, likely, and almost certain. This one is more, laid out and trackable and measurable, which is great. Sometimes they are a little vague, and one PM might categorize a risk differently than another. So I think it's great that we're able to, put some actual KPIs here with things like likelihood of the risk to become an issue, with that 0 to 10% range, etc. As you can see, the other ones, they're just low, medium, and high and extreme. So again, there is some variability and flexibility on the PM side to interpret what that means. But I think the important thing is that as long as these risks are categorized against each other, and we have a list that is a living document, those risks can change in priority over time. That's totally okay. But we do need a starting point onto how to measure these against each other. So let's say that we have a team that is, waiting on work to be done from an external vendor, and that vendor is unable to, bring us the results we need in a certain amount of time, potentially, right? Because this is a risk, and that is something that maybe we've had experiences with this vendor being late on deliverables before. We'll definitely want to keep that in mind as we work with them again. Some projects you're kind of forced to work with certain teams, and maybe that's just something that you need to be cognitive of and document along the life of your project. Now that we have our risk compared and prioritized against each other, we'll want to log this information somewhere. So what does that look like? That's going to be a risk register. A risk register is where we're going to document our risk throughout the project. It's a living document. It's okay to make changes as risk and the details around those risks are going to change throughout your project. The example you see here, again, this is just one example of what a risk register might look like. Different companies, different industries, different projects, those are all going to have different risk registers attached to them. They're all going to do it a little bit differently. And that's usually the case with anything project management related. So keep that in mind as, if you change companies, if you change industries, things are going to be done a little differently. I do like this example here. So let's just take a look at the first row. The project sprint stories are not well defined. The likelihood of the risk is high. So there's a high chance that our sprint stories are not going to be detailed enough when we need to utilize them. The impact of the risk, also high. Now, why I like this is because it highlights those comparisons against the other rows of risk. And it's color-coded. It's easy on the eyes. It's easy to understand and follow. The important thing about that first row, that seems to be something early on in the project. Obviously this is a more agile approach. If this was a more waterfall approach, and our requirements need to be done very early on in the project, of course, right? We'd want to make sure that's done soon. And it sounds like, on this example, we need to address that right away. So what is their mitigating action? To complete the project charter, having all the business cases and ensure requirements are gathered properly. So, a little vague, but there is some teamwork, some PMing needed here in order to get the project sprint stories detailed enough for the team to be able to run with the work, right? They need to look at those stories and understand what the work is. If it's too vague, right, there's going to be too many open questions on what exactly is needed. What are we really looking to get out of this project? And again, this being agile, it looks like, that might be okay that it's a little vague. We might not have a clear picture. We'll get prototypes out, that sort of thing. But it needs to be clear enough to at least understand where's the starting point at for us here. The next box as part of this process is review controls. And before we jump into that, I just want to note that it's okay to bounce between boxes. So, if we're reviewing our risk, a risk may just identify itself and may surface for us through a variety of means. So we may bounce from box to box, right? It doesn't necessarily always go in a perfect flow of each thing, right? Nothing really is always that simple. So we may be assessing a risk while we're also trying to identify new risk for maybe a new scope was added for a new application. So maybe we need to identify some risk there while currently still assessing some other risk. Totally fine. But the next box here, review controls, this is basically just establishing how we as project managers and as a project team are going to review risk throughout the life of a project. Are we going to have a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly call to go through this list? Does this project sponsor prefer just to have a bi-weekly email containing the highest likely risk? These are questions that need and should be decided by not just the PM, but the primary stakeholders and sponsors of the project as well. Because again, going back to projects being managed differently by company, by industry, etc., it's just going to vary depending on your exact organization. And again, that's totally okay, but just something to be aware of. The last box here, control risk, is the active work being done by the PM to try to prevent these risks from becoming issues. Whether that's working with stakeholders, trying to alleviate these risks from coming to light, updating documentation, but it's really that the fingers on keyboards, boots on the ground, us really doing the work, right? That's not just something that happens, just sitting there doing nothing, right? There's actual work that's being done to try to mitigate these risks from becoming bigger issues than we want them to be. I'll just close this video out by saying that this was a high-level overview of what the risk management process looks like. Again, it's going to vary by PM and by project sponsor, project leadership. But that's who you're going to want to work with to really define how this is going to look for you on your project. PMs may do it differently, and that's okay. I think the more important part is that you get alignment with those truly in charge, those sponsors, those executives that you'll be reporting to. Then you'll set yourself up for success when it comes to risk management. So if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.